personally, I feel as if we are moving backwards, as a nation when we ban books, because we have a history um, of banning, censoring, restricting books at key moments in American history, and also forgetting that at least the colonial iteration of this country was actually born out of religious persecution and banning of the texts that supported religious alterity, which is why we had colonists come to the US seeking religious freedom, and which is why both freedom of religion, the right to read, freedom of the press, uh, or freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of petition are all found in the very First Amendment. So when I see books being banned and censored, it lets me know that that power is being abused for a very political reason, because that's always the history. And what we have to do about it is, number one, we have to do what I think Sylvia, is doing, is that we have to write our stories, we have to tell our stories, and we also have to read our stories and fight for our stories, fight against their erasure, and we have to fight for the institutions that are being persecuted because they offer, or their mission is tied to freedom of speech or the right to read or access to books. And of course, that's education, schools, which are under attack, universities, which are now under attack, and of course, libraries.
Could I
Thank
add
you.
something to that? I'm so excited about being here and being with Tracie, who will protect us all. But this thing you're saying, like this banning a book, is a very political move. Um, I think and you will all agree with me that there's no surprise that the books that are being banned are those that are addressing racial issues, immigration issues, queer issues. So everything that makes us think, question, or reflect or understand the diversity of identities in race and gender, etc. Those are the books that are being banned or forbidden in certain schools, which I don't know if it's the same or not. I've been thinking about it, or in families. So it is an attempt um, to take our ideas and our own way of learning about the world or learning about ourselves.
I I really like the way that you put that, Mrs. Zéleny. Thank you so much. I actually had a follow-up question that ties it to Natalia's question, actually. So would you say that banning literature works could be unconstitutional? And if so, why does it happen?
Mm. Is that to me or Tracie? Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
For both.
I'll just jump in first, and then Sylvia, you can bring up the rear. And I definitely want to, say as we get into it, that in the years that we've been calculating, what we see is about 41% of books are banned because they have some language or themes around LGBTQIA existence or history or lived experience or fiction. And then closely following, about 40% of books are banned because they contain some aspect of Black, Indigenous, Latino, people of color, sort of histories, lived experience, fiction. And then we have books that are banned simply because they talk about civil rights in general or social justice in general, or because they, speak about religion or have any kind of theme around sexuality. And some of that, of course, is, about sexual abuse or rape or things like that. So I think, though, getting back, I just wanted to speak to that because that is very real. And we have seen a rise of books being banned, actually. right after George Floyd. That's where we really began to see the pushback against critical race theory, which was called out as problematic first, and then it became more of a issue around LGBTQIA morality or erasure. So, these are not just anecdotes. This is factual. But to your point, Pedro, 80% of people in this country still believe that censorship is unconstitutional. We know that our Constitution calls for freedom of speech and freedom of the press. And as sort of a further mandate, 80% of people who are polled, regardless of political party, still believe that banning books is unconstitutional. So then why is it happening? And why have we gotten to a place where 46 out of 50 states now have legislation that's either been passed or is pending that would support or call for censorship? Not only is this a political moment, but it is an ultra conservative and a minority moment. So we are sort of seeing, how wealth is concentrated usually by a few people. We're seeing just a few people and just a few groups. And of course, it's racialized and it's classed, I have to say. We're seeing those people really control discourse. And there's been articles, especially when you think about Moms for Liberty, which is mostly a white women's conservative movement. I'm a librarian, so this is not my opinion. This is fact, right? This is primary source evidence that speaks to this. But when you look at it, there's been a lot of articles. It's like, are Moms for Liberty the new kingmakers? Despite the fact that they've had a lot of controversy and some would say, quote unquote, sort of maybe illicit activity within their ranks, they still are, and their offshoots are still calling the shots when it comes to censorship. So I'll stop there. I want to see what Sylvia has to say, but I think your question is a good one because censorship is still unconstitutional, even as it makes greater ground than it ever has in this country.
Sorry,
Thank you so
Sylvia, you're on
much.
mute. Hello?
Sorry, I am in two screens. So I was saying that I need all those numbers. Because I think, especially when we're teaching creative writing or we're teaching literature, and we're simply with kids, with teens, with parents, we should have these numbers, to understand the magnitude of this. And I would add, Ben Sáenz is here. This is so exciting. What worries me the most is this idea that this is to protect our kids, that this is to protect our teenagers, that this is done to protect our community, when it's absolutely doing the total opposite, right? I would say how representation is important, how let's not forget how we're built of a diversity of type of people and race and class and gender and everything else. And we learned that through our parents. We learned, yes, but we learned that through books too. Very often, I have this anecdote with my students when I'm teaching young adult right now, and my students would say how important it was for, and then I'm at the border of the Mexico, US, but students would say like how important it was for them to read a book like The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros, because finally they felt someone close to them in language, in heritage, and etc. Right? So this is the gift that books bring. I would say the same is happening with all this wave of trans rights being completely destroyed and abandoned. How important it is to have these experiences, to have these testimonies in memoir, in poetry, in fiction, about what it is to take decisions and find yourself in terms of identity. So I think that's what scares me the most, is this idea that we are protecting. We're doing the opposite, right? We're taking our kids and our teenagers the right to think, to understand themselves. And then, so the other thing is it's with parents. I don't know how parents, well, if the Constitution says so, then I should be doing this. I should not let my kids, or I should not let my kids have this book or read this book or watch this movie, because it goes, in so many levels. So it is a scary, really, what is happening, and how it's a tool in many ways to destroy the possibility of just thinking, critical thinking, emotions, identity.
Thank you, Sylvia. Very well said. And I want to welcome, Ben Sáenz. So thank you so much for joining us, Ben. And this is a good time to mention that we are going to be giving away 3 copies of Ben's Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe to 3 students, and then also 3 copies of Sylvia's Trash. So we are going to have some time for Q&A, and those students who do participate will probably be the winners. So thank you, Ben, for joining us. Like I said, so we were talking a little bit, as you know, and about this issue of book censorship, and I don't know if you yourself through your works have experienced that, but we wanted to get your take on this issue. How is it that you have encountered this? Is it growing in your experience? Is it diminishing, or what do you think?
Well, it is an issue for me, and it isn't, because I'm taught in many schools, but I'm banned in just as many. So it's really kind of weird. It's in places where they get pushback that they don't teach my book, but they make it available in libraries anyway. I think, but I think the problem with just in general with banning anything, what are we banning and why are we banning it? And I think part of it is that we created after World War II in this country one of the greatest educational institutions in the world for our educational system. And then something happened, and I'm not sure what exactly happened there, but there came this, schools are where we integrated into society. That's what integrated us into, that's integrated me into society. I lived on a farm, Spanish-speaking people, not necessarily educated in schools. And then we went to school and we got educated and integrated into the culture. It was tough. There was racism, but we did get integrated into the culture. And we got to know America and how big it was. And it wasn't just about us. And we all knew that. So even the gringos knew that. Maybe it's a part of the world I lived in, but we all knew, white or brown or black or whatever, we knew we weren't the center of the universe. And so we went to school to learn about the big world.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that may not happen in Chicago and San Francisco and New York because they thought they were the center of the universe, but we didn't. And so we got educated because we wanted to learn about, how did I learn anything? I read James Baldwin when I was a senior. I had no idea what it meant to be Black in America, especially pre-civil rights. And I learned through reading James Wright, who made rage sound elegant because he was such a great writer. And I became a big fan of his. I didn't know he was gay. I didn't know I was gay, but he, all the more reason to admire this man, all the more reason he should be taught. What is so scary about his work? What is so scary about, what's scary about my work for the right wing? I normalize being Mexican-American and I normalize being gay, and they will not have it.
Mm-hmm.
They won't have it. It's not because it's offensive. It's because they're so seductively beautiful human beings who happen to be gay and Latino, and they won't have that. That's even worse than sex between two, as far as they're concerned. They don't want us to look that good. They don't want us to see our families and how supportive they are. They don't want to see any of that. And that threatens them.
Mm-hmm.
And but we have to remind people always, at least I think of this to myself as an educator. I may not be in a classroom, but I'm an educator. And as an educator, I believe that all the children of the world belong to me, and I'm responsible for them. I'm responsible for them to learn about the world and its beauty and its vastness and its cruelty and all of it. And I'm responsible to them. I am their teacher. The children of the world belong to me and they belong to all of us. And until we really understand that, we have to understand that. I may be gay and not have any kids, but those kids are my kids, and I'm responsible to them. And as James I read in his talk to school children, James Baldwin, he said, the children of the Third Reich, when they were educated to the purposes of the Third Reich, became barbarians. There are people who wishes to raise barbarians in this country. And we have to not give in to that ever. We keep writing what we write, and we keep speaking up. They can't win. Do you know why fascism is impossible? Because it is impossible to control everyone. It's more impossible than democracy. They cannot control us all. They never will. Our voices will survive. Every dictatorship comes and goes. And what's replaced it when the dictator dies? Democracy. We have to take the threat seriously about books in a free country should never be banned. No book should be banned. We should have zero tolerance for anybody being banned in this country. And this country has no business banning books anywhere. We have to educate people to what a democracy truly is, and to have and to embrace many cultures. We're doing that, and we can't be stopped. I don't think we can be stopped. They can put roadblocks. We'll be around a lot longer than that one organization that has 10 people that go around, banning books all over the country. They will not have the day. Nevertheless, we have to stand up and say, I do not cede my morality to these people, nor do I cede God to these people. Their vision of God and their vision of morality. I am not immoral. My faith may be a little broader than theirs. I like to think of the great creator, that God is the great creator. And from him, all energy comes. All energy, and once energy comes into the world, it never leaves. Our energy will never leave. Our children need to be supported. And we do support them by the books that we write. We really do. We make them, they see themselves, they're not invisible to themselves and to other people. What we do is important, and we have to keep doing it. I don't know how we fight these people is that we keep writing and we survive.
Thank you, Ben. It's very well said. We're gonna continue, this discussion. I know we have some more discussion questions. Daniela or someone else want to jump in with the next question?
Actually, I do. Since you guys are, I imagine most of us here are people who love books and histories and narrative. Tracie, you're a librarian. Sylvia, Ben, you both are teachers and writers of this beautiful craft. I just have to ask you, and I guess that's what Ben was saying just recently. It's a responsibility to save these books, these narratives. We can let them be lost to history or time. So besides writing, what else can we do to fight this banning of books?
I think we need to stay in solidarity. The writers need more solidarity between them and more communication between librarians and writers. I do. I absolutely do. One of the things I like to do is when I go to school, I always say, can I talk to your librarians? And the reason I do that is that I want to support their work. I want to tell them you are what keeps, you're the front lines that keep us between civilization and barbarianism. Our librarians do important work, and I don't know that we as writers support them enough. That we gotta, that's one of the things we must always do, is because librarians are just great. They really are, and they need our support. They support us. They put our books in their libraries, and then they get in trouble for it. You know, the least we should do is thank them and say, "Hey, I'm here for you. What can I do?" I think that's something that's very grassroots, that we need to do that in our own communities, go out and support our librarians, and maybe we can form something more formal, writers and librarians kind of thing. I think that's really important because they need to see that, you know, librarians aren't famous, don't get famous. Some writers might get famous. At least all writers have some notoriety. What do librarians get? I think that we need to think about that, and support teachers, and raise our voices for teachers and say, look, and you know, these parents that are like off the wall, I mean, they don't know what they're doing. They don't know anything about education. They don't know anything about anything. They just kind of go along. We can't let them run our schools. Since when? You know, if I don't know anything about oil and gas, are they going to let me, you know, build a company? Or when I don't know anything? Why does someone who doesn't know anything about education run the system? You know, but we think that we don't need experts in education. I remember having an argument with then Governor Bush at his table when we were talking about, he says to me, he had just gotten elected, first book festival, me and my ex-wife sat at their table, and he says to me, I'm going to be the education governor. And I said, well, Governor, he says, oh, call me George. I said, George, why is it that every time we look at solving the problems of education and we have a committee to see what we can do, there are no frontline educators on that committee? None. And he says, well, Ben, we don't want the fox guarding the hen house. And I didn't skip a beat. I said, funny how that doesn't apply to oil and gas. And then he says to me, well, no, in oil and gas, we need experts. In other words, when we're going to redo education, we don't need experts. We don't need experts. They don't look at us as experts, but we are. We have an expertise to share with the world and with our children and with the parents that don't know anything. How we do that, I don't know. I think I know what needs to be done. I don't know how to get there. And I'm getting old.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that. You know, I'm going to be really quick here because mine is really simple. You know, I think there's a lot of performativity in this moment on both sides. And I have to say, I think there is a lot of performativity on the conservative side, as we have alluded to, in which we have conservatives who are sort of hijacking religion and spirituality, morality, and decency, and using those as sort of excuses or reasons why you know, some parents in a very racialized and class way should have local parenti for all children, right? That some of these movements, and there's an isolated number of them, although they're splintering, you know, they're saying, I'm in the best position basically to not just decide what my child reads, but also what your child reads. And we also know, and I've been to enough hearings to be able to say this with a lot of confidence, that for many of those people who are weaponizing reading, for many of them, sometimes their first time reading the book or even entering a library or another space in that way is basically when they became sort of radicalized by this particular movement. These are not the same people who are using public libraries or certainly not using also public school libraries, because we know how race and class public schooling has become. So I definitely want to say that, but I also would say on the other side, I think there's a lot of performativity on the liberal side. As a librarian, I can tell you that the people who tend to use the library the most are people who have the least alternatives. And so, as a librarian who, going to work in the morning, the people who would meet me there, who would already be queuing up, are people who didn't have computers at home, people who might be experiencing being unhoused, parents of children for them to be able to complete the assignment, somebody needs to get there right away to be able to print something out, or to access a computer, or to access a book. And so I talk to a lot of people who don't, who admit sheepishly that they haven't been to their local library, or that they may not have used a library since they left school, whether it's high school or junior college or college. We need to use our institutions in the same way that in order for us to keep public education safe and accessible, we need to invest in it, both as taxpayers and as parents, or as stakeholders living in communities in and around public schools that are around public schools. We need to do the same. If we don't do that, we're going to lose these institutions. And so I'll just be very blunt and say the performativity on both sides needs to end. And those of us, especially, people of color, LGBTQIA communities, we need to use our libraries and run for library school board. We need more writers. Right now, only 7% of children's literature features people who are Latino or Latin. Another small percentage, African American, even smaller percentages for Indigenous and Asian people. In fact, we have more children's books in which food and animals are the main character than people of color altogether. And we have to end that. And we need to be in the decision making role. We need to be in publishing, but more than anything, we need to start a reading revolution. We need to use our libraries, and we need to read more books so that we are creating the demand on both ends.
I love this creator reading revolution. I love this. And with that Tracie just said, I have to quote two things. One is that J.M. Barrie, the author of Peter Pan, you might remember this line that says, like, when you don't believe, every time you don't believe, a fairy dies. And then there's another one by Milton, which is that people who destroy books kills ideas or kills reason. He says something like that. So I would say, to make sure that no fairy dies, or to make sure that books don't die or don't are completely erased from the earth, there's two very important things we have to do. One is read, obviously, but the other one I would say, and I'm talking about as a professor here, is that our syllabus should go to these banned book lists. There's something happening in these books, definitely. There's something they don't want us to think about. There's something they don't want us to reflect upon. There's something they don't want us to learn, etc. So I think this is the greatest opportunity to go into those banned books list. They're crafted beautifully, because sometimes they even put them with themes, LGBTQ, da, 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 da. So once you're preparing your syllabus, when you're preparing your essays as students, go to those lists. There's probably something there that you don't know that needs your reading, that needs your eyes. And every time I think, I mean, maybe I'm very naive, but I think we change the world one book at a time, right? One reader at a time. So it just takes one book, that you read that helps you understand racial issues, class, gender identity, etc. You talk to a friend, and like chisming, this goes around, and then this book is being read, right? So I think, I mean, it's a sad and very upsetting situation, but again, I'm very naive. At the same time, I think there is this new wave of young adults who not only are reading, but also they're using social networks to share that. These booktubers, these TikTok people that are talking and bringing books attention. So I think it's maybe reading, going to the banned books list, and finding these means of communication to share, to share the love of books, to share these ideas. Because in the end, I think this is our right for knowledge, right? I think books can change the outcomes of a kid, in any type of domestic violence, abandonment, race, class issue that it's dealing with. So there are things to do, and I think this is something that we need to do together, both readers, librarians, authors, publishers. We haven't talked about publishers. And then I would go back to something that Tracie said about the percentage of children's or young adult books by Latinx writers and authors. I think that's also, we have the publishers to blame, right? I think there is this idea of marketing that is leading, the bookshelves, and this crafting, this editors telling you how is this supposed to be, because they're scared, I'm guessing, or losing money or being banned. I don't know. But I think it's a work that we need to do in all of us together, all of us bookworms that are here and elsewhere.
And sometimes it's the kids themselves who get in there. My book is a huge success because the kids sold it mouth to mouth, hand to hand. No, Simon & Schuster didn't do, they didn't do anything for my book. I mean, they nominated for those awards that won these big awards, right, that year. But why is it selling 10 years later much more? Those awards give you 1 year bump. Why 12 years later is that book still selling like hotcakes? Because kids love it and they sell it to each other. They do. They get these messages. I told my boyfriend if he didn't read that book by the end of the week, I'm over. I'm done with him. It's like they're little nerds, and they know what helps them, and they themselves sell the book. We just have to put the book in front of them, in front of the right kids. They'll sell it. They'll love out to a book, and they love it, and they'll sell it. They will. You have to bypass sometimes publishers. You have to buy, and they can, but we got to get it in their hands. And you know what? Which means that every time that we are in the presence of young people in any school, we're prepared. We're prepared to challenge them, but also let them know that we love them. That we come off passionate, but not angry. That we let them know with all of our hearts that we believe that the world is conspiring to take their hope away, and we are here to give it back to them. And I think that's really important, that never lose an opportunity in front of any audience to show them your passion and your love. And not just our anger. Because that's not going to work. We're angry because we love. We're angry because we're hurt. We have to be vulnerable and show them our hurt. And I think that's important. And I think we have to do that in our books too. And I think that's really important, because I think that kind of, if we have virtues, if we have them, let us put them on full display. And then they can't make us monsters. They really can't, because we're not. We're really, flawed, funny, decent human beings in the end. And we want them to see our decency. When I'm vulnerable, they can't turn me into a monster. I may be gay, I may be Latino, but I'm just a dorky old guy. And I need to let them see that, see my humanity. That is also, these things are also important. And I really wish we could have a real discussion with people. But it's true that the opposition makes it impossible. They're not interested in having a dialogue. They're not interested in learning. They're not interested in making the world a better place. They're just interested in slapping us down and making us invisible. And that's awfully hard to remain, we want to fight back, but we have to step back and think about how do we fight back. And it isn't, we can't go out there with both guns just shooting, because that's what everybody does. I think we need to, just reading a section of a book that was been banned and see, isn't that, what are we afraid of? What are we afraid of here? And they will have no answers. I think we are on the right side. It's just a matter of our strategies that we use. Really, we are on the right side. They're on the wrong side. They're making people invisible. If you're making somebody invisible, you can't be on the right side. Whoever it is you're making invisible. That's not our job. Our job is to make things visible and make them visible, to make language visible, to make all of those things visible to our students so they can say, wow. Or as I have an assistant who sometimes he looks at something really never seen before because he's learning, and he says, what the fuck? He's so excited. Our students can get so excited. We don't have to change everyone. We can just change a few lives. Change a few lives, you change the world. Maybe we don't get the whole room, but if we get those students that are hungry to learn, and we find them and we mentor them, and maybe we won't change the world, but maybe they will. And take no one for granted. You don't have to have a lot of readers to change lives. You don't.
I love the way that you put that, Mr. Sáenz, because I've always believed that in order to change the world, you have to change it one person at a time. And I really love the way you express that. I wanted to ask a question made by the public, namely by Ms. Fabiana. She asks, how has the voting demographic changed because of the normalization of book bannings? And do you think the average individual has become more politically aware due to these issues? And the question is directed to all three.
I'll jump in here just to save time because this is something I've been looking at, and I'm so happy to be, here with Sylvia and Benjamin, because I feel like we're really getting sort of a very round way of looking at this. So I'm going to kind of continue to just undergird our conversation with some of the data. And I think that the reality, as I said before, upwards of 80%, and it's been poll after poll after poll, starting with the emergence of censorship in the modern era. I would say that it has really been going on sort of drip by drip since about 2016 in this new iteration, and reaching sort of full course in 2020. And I just want to, draw people's, attention, back to, the rhetoric around, that emerged during the presidential campaign of first President Obama and President Trump, and then President Trump, and now President Biden. There was both simultaneously, a lot of hate speech that emerged, but then we also began to see more censorship, whether it was around critical race theory or at the beginning of the pandemic, especially when Black and Brown people were dying in unprecedented numbers because they were on the front lines and were not able to work remotely, and often did not have access to the informatics necessary to keep up or make appointments for early vaccination, compared to people who might have decided that they didn't want to wear masks and things like that. But if we kind of like situate ourselves there, even with all of that and all the demographics implied with that, we still see today that not only do we have a majority of people in this country who believe that any type of censorship is unconstitutional, we also have about 78% of Americans who say that they would think twice about voting for someone who supported censorship. So those numbers continue to bear out. It is definitely, I think, as Benjamin may have said, this effort to erase or delegitimize the stories of people of color, and I'll just say queer people, or lesbian, bisexual, transgender, gay, intersex people, is definitely an effort to not just to delegitimize their stories or the story making, because some of the people, a lot of the people who are talking about censorship are not avid readers and may not have read those texts at all before they call for them to be banned. This is really an effort to politically disenfranchise and delegitimize entire voting blocks that tend to be rising. Because one thing for sure is that younger people of color are tending not to vote conservative. Younger people in general are tending not to vote conservative. And we also know that within the queer community, there is more of an interest in voting on specific issues as opposed to voting in a block. Now, that is, what I'm quoting there and talking about are actual statistics and not just anecdotes or feelings. So I'm going to stop there to say that the reason why we are seeing such voracious censorship and such inane censorship happening, where you have a book like Amanda Gorman, The Hill We Climb, which says nothing, which doesn't even really speak about anything but the need for Americans to, regardless of their origins, to come together after a pandemic and after associated decline in our economy, that we need to pull together, which is what that book is about. When that is banned in the state of Florida and they have to backpedal and even find a reason why, it's very clear that because she is a young Black woman, it is seen as a civil rights text or a social justice text. And we just see in Alabama, Kay Ivey saying, you can't even, not only books, but you can't even teach or talk about diversity, equity, inclusion at any state institution or institution that receives state funding. So I just want to say that we're going to see even more of this clamping down, because the voting bloc is actually, the voters are moving in the opposite direction. And this really is picking at crumbs, but it's going to get more dangerous and it's going to get more severe before it gets better.
Actually, in the comments, it's interesting that you bring up history and I'm just gonna say how it is, and you're a historian, you're gonna understand. So there's this political disenfranchisement that's been in the United States ever since the beginning, basically, of this country. And Shafford Gordon asks, do you feel that the absence of books will cause history to repeat itself? I know that's a loaded question, but I feel it's important that we ask this. So yeah, what do you think?
I'm going to be very quick with this. Not only that, but I think it's scary because it could get way worse. I think what's happening right now, we have a war here in Ukraine. We have what's happening in Palestine. This, again, I'm going to go with trans rights because it's so scary that trans kids do not get to be who they want to be. They do not get the service, the medical service they deserve. So I think it's not only that history will repeat itself, but it might get even worse, right? And it's scary. And I'm guessing that this is the moment to do something. We're in an election, phase. So I don't know. I think this is a scary moment, and I know books will not solve wars, but books will make people raise their voices. I think we have so many examples. I'm thinking when Tracie mentioned The Hill We Climb, I was thinking of The Hate You Give. How important is what Angie Thomas did in this book, which seems like it's about family, but it's about much more. There's so many intersections in this book, and I think more and more we see authors that are not only telling a story, but all the little corners that have to do with it. In the end, I think it's about the responsibility we have as writers and as readers, right? So yeah, I don't know. I think I was all over the place, but I'm scared about that too.
Sometimes we think that the only people who teach history are historians. And I think that's not right. I think one of the things that I do when I speak, or I did in my creative writing classes, I'd walk in sometimes and I'd say, okay, how many of you good people hate rich people? And I raised my hand and nobody else raised their hands, and they go, oh, Mr. Sáenz, you don't hate rich people. You're not the kind of guy that goes around hating people. And I said, no, I think I hate rich people, in general. And I think because they hate me. And they hate you too. And then I get out my statistics about the social order, how the kind of capitalism we have has broken with the people. We used to have social contracts with people. We don't have them anymore. And we say, look what's going on in the world. And then we have this whole discussion. And then they say, and you know why? And at the end, I said, but you know why you don't hate rich people? Because somewhere deep inside of you, you think one day you just might be rich like them. Let me disabuse you of that notion. Nobody in this room is ever going to be rich. And they said, well, why are we talking about this? This is creative writing. I said, well, tell you what do you write about? What do you know? How can your books be subtle? If you don't know what's going on in the world, you have to know the world. I did the same thing with how many of you are feminists one day? 2 brave young women and me raise our hands. And besides, you can't be a feminist because you're a man. I said, well, let's hold that. Let's just put that aside right now. Why aren't you a feminist? And the guys sit there and I go, well, I know why. Because you think that a feminist means that they're ball busters. That's what you think. That's what you've been taught to think. You're threatened by them, but they don't want your private parts. They don't want any of that. They want to be equal. They're not going to take anything away from you. If someone demands to be equal to you, well, what's wrong with that? It's a human rights issue. Why aren't you a feminist? Don't you think that women are equal to you? And if you don't think they are, then you know what? You're not going to be a very good writer because you have no compassion. Develop compassion for the world you live in and understand the world you live in and make those connections and know that, for instance, know stuff in history, like read some history. Read some history. What happened in this country? How did we become a great country? No country ever became great without them having their hands washed in blood. No country ever did that. And we certainly, and then people have these attitudes like, oh, Native Americans are immigrants. Some people actually think that. That's crazy. That's just nuts. Or they think that, oh, African Americans, they're like the other immigrants that came to this country. Excuse me, I don't think so. They were brought here in chains. They didn't come here, to better themselves like many other immigrant groups. They were dragged here in chains, and that does make them a different kind of minority. And we should think about that. That all minorities are not the same. Some came here to make a better life, and some came here so that they could build a great country on their backs. They even did that with people who came here on their own. But we have to understand these things. And it is not just a matter of opinion. It is not just a matter of opinion. When people say Black Lives Matter and then they say Blue Lives Matter, excuse me, there is no such thing as a blue skin. That is a uniform that people wear, and it's a choice that they make. It's a career. But skin is not a career. And we have to, when we get into discussion with people, we have to make that clear. Black lives and blue lives, there's no such thing as a blue life. There is such a thing as a black life. And I think that we have to understand the arguments and to take them down at every chance we get without being the angry guy in the room. Because I've done that before. At the beginning of my academic career, I didn't sign up to be an academic activist, but it turns out that that's what I had to do. Because we had a 1950s kind of curriculum. We had to change the curriculum. It was like pulling teeth. But we won. And then I was told, you don't behave like someone who wants tenure. Well, I wasn't easily intimidated. Well, I said, I told the chair of the department who told me that I didn't behave like someone who wants tenure. I told him, well, it's a good thing I'm Mexican. I know how to mow a lawn and trim a tree. I can do something else. But I would not be intimidated by these things that we're intimidated by. What do we have to be afraid of anymore? What? Well, someone's not going to like me? You know, we have to throw ourselves under the bus sometimes. We're not here to be liked. We're here to be educators. We're here to love, and love, as the poet says, is a lonely and austere office. A lonely and austere office that we must hold. And to stand our ground and to say, this is real. Being gay and being Latino is everything to me because that's me. It's not a politics. You may politicize my identity if you wish, but I'm a human being who is gay and Latino. And they can't hurt me. I think sometimes we're just afraid that we still are afraid of what people think. Well, who cares what a bigot thinks? I don't. Nothing to talk about. But we can tell them, look, you hate, and I do not admire anyone who hates. I cannot do that. And to say it that simply and that quietly, we do not admire anyone who hates. We, everything gets lost in the shouting, but we don't have to shout. We can be the quiet voice that is heard, and I think that's really important, and it has always been to me. And I think one of the things that we have to do is say, what is this fight all about? It is about our children, not about us. I want our children to have more opportunities than I had, to know more than I know, to see the world in a different light than I see the world, in a better light and stronger light. I want them to grow up and outright me, write circles around me. I want them to succeed and make the world and see and understand that the world is beautiful and that we're killing it. And we can't do that. We can't let the world die, because the world is going to go on, but it's not going to forgive us. There will come a day that it will not be able to give us life. It won't, because we were so ungrateful. And we have to put it in those terms. God, like if we could take all of our kids out to all the national parks, they'd all go green. When we stand before this beautiful desert, this beautiful landscape, and you say, and take a dog with you. The dog and the landscape will make you believe the world can be a better place. It's a simple thing. See, like every day, what gives me hope, I don't go out much anymore. My hips are bad and I'm not in good health, and I'm trying to get back up there. But I have a little Yorkie that makes me believe every morning that there is beauty in the world and there is love in the world, which is really silly, isn't it? But it's true, And I think point out to our kids the simplicity and beauty of life is, at every moment, and to call on the kid that's never called on, I used to my bad students, the bad girls and bad boys were always my favorite students. Oh, look, a dog. They were my favorite students. And I would talk to them and they say, well, they say, oh, everything is bullshit. Even this class is bullshit. But it's bullshit that I can deal with. Because they think everything, they're so cynical. How can you be so young and so cynical? It's because of us. It's because of us. And, we have to take responsibility for the things we did and didn't do. And at every turn, to be able to say, look, I was wrong about that. We need to build a culture of forgiveness. Books do that. Books do that.
Yeah.
And that's amazing to me. I mean, I learned everything about what it's like to be African American in books. In Las Cruces, New Mexico, there was one Black family. There was no Black people, but there were books. There were books, and then there was, women. I read, women's poetry, and they said, why are they so mad? And I would read these books, and I'd say, oh, I'd be mad too. Read Adrienne Rich and Audre Lorde and these wonderful writers, and you say, and just as Daniel Chacon said, open yourself up to the text. Don't judge it, right when you start reading it. Don't judge the book. Experience the book. Be open to it. And that openness is what changes people. When I had a student once, I taught Jack Kerouac's On the Road. And the essay, this one student began the essay by, he should get a job. Well, hell, he's judgmental as hell. He's judging, not reading. Besides, he's not real. But that kind of attitude, our students, how can we change those attitudes? We change them by making sure that we see them. We have to do that work. We see them. I used to sometimes get a class and I asked them, okay, give me your favorite CD. I don't know anything about the music they liked. And I would listen to them, and I learned. I learned from them. And I asked them, oh, why? I don't understand why. Like 9 Inch Nails, like a long time ago. I got into 9 Inch Nails because they educated me, but they also knew that I was interested in them. And then I saw them. And all of these things, people just want to be seen and people want to be heard. The right wing wants to be heard. They want to be heard. They feel left behind. They feel left behind because they've been taught that white people should run the world, and they feel they're white, and why don't I have a piece of it? Go back historically, and a lot of white men were left out of the whole system of slavery. The white men, there's poor white men that weren't part of slavery. They weren't even part of the economy. They were left behind a long time ago. And so how do we talk to them? They're just afraid. I was in Austin once, and there was these guys with the rifles because there was a parade, and they were talking about the rights of Middle Eastern immigrants in this country. They were having a march, and there was these 3 guys with guns on my corner, and I heard those guys talking. They were scared little boys, is what they were. And I felt bad for them. I didn't know how to talk to them. So I told one of the guys, my dad used to have a rifle. I don't know what else to say. But, by the end of the thing, they knew I wasn't on their side, but I wasn't yelling at them. And I don't know. I think every human exchange we have matters, ultimately.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ben. I hate to, bring this to a close, but in the interest of time, it is also National Library Week. So, I really want to give props to Tracie and all other librarians there, for the hard work that they do, right? They are in many ways our front lines, as you had said, Ben. And I'll pass it on to Diana, who's going to announce our 6 winners of the books. If you guys if you're a winner, go ahead and stick around so that we can get your information. But again, I want to thank our panelists today, our student fellows from Diana's Literature for Everyone. You can follow Literature for Everyone on Instagram. You can follow Papagayo on Instagram. And thank you guys for joining us. But without further ado, Diana, who's our 6 winners?
Okay, thank you. Congratulations to Fabiana, Shafford, Dania Marquez, Elvira Catalina, Valeria Alvarado, and Pablo, whose last name I don't have. So if I mentioned your name, please stick around so I can get your information. And that's it. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Well, if you guys could stick around, thank you so much, Ben. It was great seeing you, great hearing from you. Sylvia, thank you so much and congrats again. Tracie, it was great to see you again. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you all.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Read a lot.
We will.
The next book you read may change your life.
And
It
somebody
will.
else's. Yes.